Hey everyone, this is Paul Gale from PaulGaleNetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for video game sales. It is May 10th, 2022, and in today's video we are going to go over a lot of Nintendo sales data. Nintendo just dropped last night their quarter financial report for the fiscal quarter ending March 31st, 2022, including their fiscal year report ending their fiscal year 2021, which was March 31st, 2022. We're going to go over the hardware side of things, software side of things, tell you what I think is going to happen going forward, and I'm going to do my best to clearly break down what these numbers mean, why they're impressive, and so forth. So, to begin, we're going to check out this beautiful number right here, 107.65 million. That is the new total life-to-date sales as of March 31st, 2022 of the Nintendo Switch console itself. That means that in the last quarter, from January 1st to March 31st, it sold a whopping 4.11 million units. That's really impressive, especially considering this system is now over 5 years old. You know, it came out March 3rd, 2017, so after 5 years and 28 days on the market, it did 107.65 million units. It's a staggering number. It's that much more impressive when you actually realize, looking at the Wii U, the Wii U's software sales in total was at 103.48. As of December 31st last year, Nintendo Switch hardware almost matched Wii U's software, but now it has officially surpassed it. Nintendo Switch hardware. There are more actual Nintendo Switch consoles sold out there in the world than there were pieces of software sold on Wii U. That's a staggering piece of news, in my opinion. That 107.65 million, by the way, that is very close to what I thought it was going to be several months ago. I was saying 107.5, so the fact that I was just 150,000 units shy is within the smallest margin of error you could really be for anticipating something like this. I mean, if I said 107.65, I would have been exactly spot on, but 107.5 was still quite close, so I'm happy with that sales projection. As for how many units it did in the last fiscal year, 23.06 million. For a system in its fifth year, and its fifth year's worth of sales, to do that much without any massive worldwide global price drop, any long-term sales reduction, is wild. Without there being any real new Plus model, Pro model, beefed up, powerful model that has come along the way, that much more impressive. Yes, we've had a Nintendo Switch Lite, a Nintendo Switch OLED model, technically the red box model that replaced the base Nintendo Switch with the bigger, better battery life, but still like no, new Nintendo 3DS, right? Still not quite a PlayStation Pro or an Xbox One X kind of situation. Although I wouldn't be surprised if in 2023, perhaps alongside The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and its sequel, I should say, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel, or The Legend of Zelda Breath of Duality, if that ends up being true, which I expect that game to come out about March 24th, just a little bit after the 6th anniversary, because that is officially the first Friday of spring. So I'm just going with that for now. Maybe we see a new Nintendo Switch, a Nintendo Switch Plus launch alongside the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and that would be pretty awesome. Have the game be on this massive install base of 128 million Nintendo Switch consoles out there, simultaneously taking advantage of new Nintendo Switch hardware to have the best performance and best visuals on said device. I don't know, I could definitely see it happening. But time will tell. As for next year, Nintendo is anticipating 21 million Nintendo Switch consoles to be sold for this upcoming fiscal year, which, once again, a few months ago I was saying I think this is going to be the path. 107.5 by March 31st, 2022, 128 by March 31st, 2023, and that would be 108.65 if it's exactly 21. Now Nintendo could be going a little conservative and it might sell 22, might sell 22 and a half, we'll see. Or it could be just under that and be at 127.8 or 128 even, depending on chip shortage and stuff like that. But Nintendo has its projections. They're probably going to be very close to 21. And then going forward, my next number was a little bit more conservative, and I was calling it 145 million, which would be 17 million more approximately by March 31st, 2024. If it could do 145 million, and you're reading these results May 10th, 2024, and you see that Nintendo Switch is now at 145 million, very few people are still going to be skeptical of, could Nintendo Switch beat the Nintendo DS and the PlayStation 2? At that point, like I said, very few people I think would be saying, no, it's not going to happen, because we still have yet to have an official price drop. There are now 822.18 million video game pieces of software officially sold on the system without an official player's choice line. Yes, Nintendo has packaged Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in with the Nintendo Switch several times over in the last, several years. Yes, they have price drops with retailers and on their own eShop channel, now and again throughout the year, multiple years in, but no official price reduction of software down to like a $30 all year round line or $20 all year round line. When that eventually happens, which I think it probably will, and there's eventually a Nintendo Switch permanent console price drop, which I also think will eventually happen, that even when Nintendo's revised Nintendo Switch console comes out, if that's real, like a Plus model for instance, even when an official Nintendo Switch 2 comes out a few years later, if Nintendo wants to, they can reduce the hardware price, reduce the software price. And can you imagine just walking into a store and buying a Nintendo Switch Lite for $80 or $99.99? If that seems too low for you, check this out. In 2000 is when PlayStation 2 came out for $300. In 2006, the PlayStation 3 came out, right? In 2009, 3 years into PlayStation 3's life, 9 years into PlayStation 2's life, Sony dropped the permanent price of PS2 at that point down to $100. A $300 machine 9 years later at $100. So who's to say a couple of years from now, even when new Nintendo Switch hardware is out, whether it is a Plus model, a full-on sequel system, or both at different times, that you can't walk into a store and buy a basic Nintendo Switch for $150 or $200. That's definitely not unimaginable. And before someone says, yeah, but by then it's old news, don't forget, when it comes to video game hardware sales and software sales, there's always different groups of people to take into consideration. There's the folks that are the first come, first serve, early go-getters. They buy the system and the games right away. They don't mind the price cost up front. They want to experience it for the longest amount of time. There are people that wait for the sales prices, maybe get it as a secondary system, maybe a certain game tickles their fancy and that's when they dive in. And then there are the people that, are a little bit more money conscious, or perhaps aren't as big of a video game fan as you and I watching this video, making this video, and they're going to say, okay, $80, yeah, I'll buy a $100 device, $70 device. I'm not going to spend $300 or $350. I don't need that OLED model now. But when software costs $20 or $30, and maybe they have a second or a third kid, don't forget this generation is spanning a while. There are new families being made every day. There are new kids that, if you were a young family with a 2-year-old 5 years ago and you're not the biggest gamer, you probably didn't buy a Nintendo Switch. But now that your son or daughter is 7 years old, 5 years later, and his or her, that individual's friends in school have the console, and the console's price dropped and games are more affordable and people are talking about it, you have that second wave of sales. And I think Nintendo has a really good outlook of likelihood that the Nintendo Switch is going to surpass the DS and the PS2. I've always said that 140 is like the base minimum, that it couldn't do any less than 140. I also always said 160 is very likely. And then I also said, the ambitious me says I could see this system being a 210 plus million seller. And before you think like, what are you crazy? 210, that's 50 more than 160. How does that happen? Because there's this long-term sales trajectory that I think if Nintendo wants, if they position the system right, if they continue making compelling software, positive imagery via ads and commercials and celebrity endorsements, good games that come out for years on, proper price drops, a more advanced piece of hardware, when the successor is out, still supporting the original hardware for a couple of years via cross-play titles, then yeah, when you have a $150 Nintendo Switch, a $90 Nintendo Switch Lite, maybe you've got a $200 Nintendo Switch OLED model, and then you've got the $300 or the $350 Plus, and then the $400 Nintendo Switch 2, different SKUs. Maybe one of those drops out because you don't want to oversaturate or overcomplicate the market for the masses thinking like, well, there's 5 Nintendo Switches, what do I get? Maybe simplify things a bit. At that point, long run, if Nintendo, I should say, wants to keep those manufacturing lines open and have, all right, a couple of tracks pumping out those few million here, you could easily see another several years of a long, slow tail exist where Nintendo not only surpasses like that 160, but goes into the 200 million range. The 1 billion that you're seeing, well, that you're going to see in a moment when it comes to software, is also something that's going to happen. It's at 822.18 million right now. That is a very strong attach rate as well. It is 7.64 million. Or sorry, I should say 7.64 to 1. That's the ratio. That's the attach rate of amount of Nintendo Switch owners, the average owner owning 7.64 games. That's really strong. And if you look at that 822.18 million total software, 55.77 was made in the last quarter. Multiply that times 4, and what are you going to get? 200 million. And what do you think Nintendo is anticipating? They're anticipating 210 million Nintendo Switch software to sell over this next year, from April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023. Another 210 million to sell. For the last fiscal year, by the way, that just ended, the one that we're talking about, as of March 31st, they sold 235.07 million in that year. So they're expecting just a little bit less, probably because The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel is towards the end of that, and it'll carry through into April, and then officially it'll be a part of the next fiscal year report beginning April 1st, 2023, Otherwise, you're looking at some heavy hitters here. They're anticipating Pokemon Legends Arceus to do well over the holidays, Mario Strikers and Nintendo Switch Sports to do well. They're anticipating Kirby to have some nice legs, which we'll talk about that in a moment. And probably stuff like Bayonetta 3, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Fire Emblem Warriors, 3 Hopes. They're all looking at, a few million selling for each of those. And I think that they're right with this projection of 210, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to do more, especially if something like the pairing of Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet exceed their expectations. We'll see. But we've got a lot of software to go over, including the fact that Nintendo had 26 more million sellers, not 26 entirely new million sellers, but 26 games sold a million or more in the last year. 13 of those from Nintendo and 13 of those from their third-party partners. So when people say like, oh yeah, well, the only games that sell on Nintendo Switch are first-party, that's not necessarily the case. It's actually not the case at all. Do the best-selling games that happen to be on Nintendo Switch come from Nintendo and their other first-party, second-party studios? Yes, but to have 13 other games sell a million or more in the last year from third parties, that's very impressive, and I guarantee you that these third-party companies are very happy to be on Nintendo Switch. Let's get into the software side of things, and we'll begin with the new, well, not the new, but the reigning and returning champion of Nintendo Switch software, the best-selling game on the console, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is now at a whopping 45.33 million copies sold. It is an impressive game, no doubt, even when you realize that, yeah, every holiday season it's getting a few million more because it's packed in for a limited amount of time around Black Friday and the holiday season in December of being packed in with Nintendo Switch. But still, 45.33 million. It sold 1.98 million in this last quarter. In second place is Animal Crossing New Horizons, and that's at 38.64 million now. That's a wild one because it did 1.02 million in the last quarter. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is third with 28.17 million. It sold a whopping 770,000 copies in the last quarter. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the launch game for Nintendo Switch, the game that was selling so well at launch that there were actually more copies of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sold out there than Nintendo Switch hardware at launch in that opening couple of week time frame, which is wild. This game did 750,000 for a 5-year-old game in the last quarter, selling practically as well as new software that comes out on the market. Really cool to see. In fifth is Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield, now at 24.27 million. It moved a nice 370,000 in the last quarter. Super Mario Odyssey, beautiful game right here. Also a year one title as it came out in 2017. It's at 23.5 million. It did a whopping 480,000 in the last quarter. Super Mario Party with 17.78 million units there. 390,000 in the last quarter. Keeping in mind, Mario Party Superstars is still out, and Super Mario Party managed to sell nearly 400,000 in the quarter. Awesome, right? Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pokemon Shining Pearl is now at 14.65 million. It did 680,000 in the last quarter, on its way to being a 15 million seller. And that's another thing I'm going to talk about in a moment. Next up, number 9 is the pairing of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Let's Go Eevee. It's at 14.53 million worldwide right now, and that's really cool because it sold another 200,000 in the last quarter, and this is while Pokemon Legends Arceus is out on the system, while Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are out, while Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield are out, while New Pokemon Snap is out, and Nintendo Switch's first Pokemon outing, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, managed to sell this well. 14.53 million, another 200,000 for the quarter. Awesome stuff. And finally, as far as this top 10 chart goes, Ring Fit Adventure with 14.09 million total, and it actually had quite a nice quarter, bigger than some of those other games that I mentioned, now having sold 560,000 copies. That's over 500,000, which is beautiful. I will also note, because I did mention that I do expect Nintendo Switch software to reach 1 billion and be Nintendo's first system to do so ever by March 31st, 2023. That was my original projection. About a year ago, I came to this conclusion. I want to say it was around September of 2021 or earlier, about a year ago from now. Yeah, I guess it was March then. Oh, well, what am I thinking? It's not September. Probably about March 2021 is when I came to this realization that I think Nintendo Switch is going to reach 1 billion about 2 years from now. That's what it was. So back then, I thought, give it 2 more years, and in that quarter ending March 31st, 2023, we'll probably be at 1 billion. And sure enough, if you take this 822 million and add on at least 210, you're going to be at 1,033,000,000, something like that. And that is terrific. If we go back here, I'm just going to show you this real quick. No Nintendo Switch hardware has ever had that many games sold. 3DS did well with 388.55. Wii U, we discussed earlier, with 103.48. Wii and the Nintendo DS were up there. 921.85 and 948.76 respectively. Nintendo is just shattering all of the records, you know. It's already the third best-selling video game console of recent memory, only being behind, you know, PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo DS. It's the fourth all-time, where it goes PS2, Nintendo DS, PlayStation 2, and Nintendo Switch. However, by the end of this year, by mid-November at the latest, honestly, it's going to pass up PlayStation 4 and the Game Boy. PlayStation 4 is at about 117 million, Game Boy is at about 118 million, and like I said, Nintendo Switch by March 31st next year is going to be at 128. So by mid-November, you're going to be looking at that, you know, 119 million mark or something like that, and then it's going to sell another 9 million from mid-November to March 31st, if not more. So we're going to have a new official third best-selling system ever by March 31st next year, only behind PlayStation 2 and Nintendo DS. So I did want to rewind a little bit on that for a moment. Okay, so we finished the top 10, but there is more to discuss. And actually could go over here and show you that, because I do have this prepared, and you can see these are the numbers that I already discussed earlier. And if we scroll down here, make sure you're able to see what I see. Okay. That's good right there, I think. The 11th best-selling game of the quarter, or 11th best-selling Nintendo Switch game, I should say, at this point, is New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, with 13.31 million life to date. In the last quarter, it did 590,000. Splatoon 2, we have a nice new update. It's at 13.3 million. As you know, recently it got knocked out of the top 10 with Ring Fit Adventure replacing it, but now you also see that New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe is technically ahead of it by a little bit, 10,000 or so. But Splatoon 2, more importantly, we didn't get an update on this game and its sales since September of 2021. So we've seen that now it has grown 620,000 since then. Pokemon Legends Arceus, the game that started off the year with a bang. I first reported that its opening weekend did 6.5 million. Then I provided an update not too long after, telling people that it hit 8. We got an official confirmation from the Pokemon Company after I reported the 6.5 that it indeed did 6.5, and then I gave my soft, close estimation that it probably did about 12 million for the quarter, in which it wasn't even a full 3 months, not in the holiday time frame either. And that 12 million projection was very close. It did 12.64 million, so I'm very happy for that game. It has a whole 9 months ahead of it to sell, from April 1st to December 31st this year. It has an official holiday this, mid-November to end of December period. As you saw with the previous Pokemon games, like Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, even when new Pokemon titles are out, the old ones continue to sell well every quarter. So even with Pokemon Scarlet, Pokemon Violet coming out this fall, probably mid-November, like the 18th or so, Arceus is still going to do well. I think it's going to be somewhere in that 18 plus million range. Originally I had a slightly lower range, then I kind of upped it, and I think if you want to be safe but somewhat realistic, 18 million is still kind of in there. It could go up higher into that 22 field, but time will tell. Moving on, anyways, because I could stay a long time on talking about Pokemon, because I'm really proud of Nintendo and the Pokemon Company for nailing that one. Beautiful game. Luigi's Mansion 3 is now at 11.43 million. It sold another 390,000 copies in the last quarter. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury is now at 9.43 million. It did 580,000 copies for the last quarter. This game is going to do 10 million. It's just a matter of time. Just like Luigi's Mansion 3 is going to do 12 million. Keep in mind, Super Mario 3D World was a Wii U port where it did several million, but it was just on such a small install base that, it couldn't get quite these high numbers unless if it had an insanely high attach rate. Here we're seeing that for a port plus a new mini game that for me personally, Bowser's Fury, took 9 hours and 35 minutes to beat 100%, get all of the cat shines. Was worth it. It was worth it to me just to buy that portion, but I also, still enjoyed the rest of it. Again, even though I enjoyed the original one with my wife on a Wii U several years ago, now I'm enjoying the new one with my kids, all 4 of us playing and stuff like that. But anyways, Mario Party Superstars. This did very well for the quarter, moving 1.45 million copies, 6.88 million overall. Clubhouse Games 51 Worldwide Classics, now at 4.22 million. We got an update on this one because, like with Splatoon 2, we didn't get an update on this one in a while. The last time was March 21st. So since then, it sold a whopping 1.08 million. Awesome. Pretty cool to see that this little game, filled with mini games, is over 4 million. I like it. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is at 3.91 million, moving 60,000 in the last quarter. Not a ton of sales, but it's inching its way towards 4 million mark, and it will probably end its lifetime, below 4.5 or something like that, unless if there are price drops and things, and unless if, also if there's some kind of more notable tie-in to the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, where it's like, okay, you get to go back in time and play as that Link, or Demise revisits, and there's some more lore connected between the two. If that kind of stuff ends up being true, then you could see kind of an upkick once again in the sales for that game. Here's a big one right here. It's an important one, Metroid Dread, now at 2.9 million. I'm happy with this number, and it's kind of what I expected, sort of. Let me explain myself. It sold 160,000 copies for the last quarter. Not a tremendous amount, but also kind of to be expected. It's a single-player game. It's a 2D side-scroller. The Metroid games have never sold that well, unfortunately. However, Metroid Dread now is officially the best-selling Metroid game in franchise history. I first reported its opening weekend's worth of sales. Then I provided a couple of weeks' worth of sales, like, what it did as of the 17-day mark or something like that. And then I also said what it did very early January as of December 31st. A couple of months before Nintendo gave its results officially for Metroid. And I said 2.6 million is what it sold across eShop and in physical in stores, what Nintendo gave to retailers, shipped, paid for, etc. And that 2.6 wound up being very accurate, as 2.74 was the official number. So selling 160,000 in the last quarter isn't bad. I know it's not as many people would like, but it's hanging in there. And we always see little upkicks in trends, both on Twitter, on the social media side of things, and on Twitch, on people streaming. If you check the Amazon charts or the eShop charts, when there's something like a boss mode rush dropping, you see a little uptick in sales. That boss rush mode didn't go down as a free update until mid-April, right? So those sales aren't a part of what you're seeing here. And I'll also note this. The reason why I didn't quite think it was 3 was because, one, I probably would have found out, and that would have been a significant thing. So since I wasn't told or didn't inquire that, like, did it do more than 3? Did it reach 3? I kind of surmised that it probably didn't, or maybe just barely did, got close to. I said 3 is fairly likely, but I honestly thought that, somewhere in that 2.9 something is probably where it's going to land, because even though it did sell and ship 2.74 million, it actually sold to consumers 2.3, which means that there were 440,000 Metroid Dread copies on store shelves. So Nintendo wasn't likely going to ship out any more just to cross that 3 million mark, because they had enough left over on the physical side. Now, Nintendo sold those technically to retailers, but the consumers, it didn't exist, those 2.74. That was 2.3. So Nintendo would have to have quite a bit on the eShop side to make up for it, to reach that 3, and it would be a combination of eShop with very strong sales and these physical sales, which are already accounted for, that having sold to reach that 3. So what I'm saying is, don't be disappointed. Be happy with the win of Metroid Dread being the best-selling Metroid game in franchise history. Also, do realize that this is 5.75 months of data for the game. It has 6.25 months to go to reach 3 million in a year. It's going to happen. April alone, with what I saw on the Amazon charts trending, on the eShop little upkick, looking at the side of Twitter and Twitch and seeing how much more conversation is going and etc., it's highly unlikely to not sell a measly 100,000 in 6 months and a week. Expect it to happen. The tricky thing is, when a game sells so little in a quarter, Nintendo is not necessarily always going to report on it. However, I expect that Metroid Dread will do well enough to chart 3 months from now when we get an update on their April 1st through June 30th, 2022 time frame. But time will tell. Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This is another one that's important to me because it came out at the very end of March with 1 week of availability. And I posted the first news on social media, on my website, etc. And the game came out on March 25th, so it had exactly 7 days. After that first weekend, I reported that it did officially clear 2 million in its opening 3-day weekend. I did not know what it did for the next 4 days, but I knew a little over 2 million. And here it makes sense. 2.65 million, perfect, beautiful number for the first 7 days of availability. It's already one of the best-selling Kirby games to date. Whether this game is a 6.5 million seller life to date, or can it achieve something like 10, which isn't too crazy. Look at Luigi's Mansion 3 and being 11.43, right? Time will tell on just how high Kirby goes, but I'm very happy for the pink puffball to get this high this fast. New Pokemon Snap, the 21st best-selling game right here on this chart, with 2.4 million, and that is 40,000 more for the quarter. And does not include sales in Japan, as Nintendo does not publish the game in Japan. So New Pokemon Snap being quite a bit higher than 2.4 million is already very pleasing. Mario Golf Super Rush at 2.35 million, selling 90,000 more for the quarter is nice. Miitopia at 1.68 million now, selling 50,000 more for the quarter is cool to see. And Big Brain Academy, Brain vs. Brain, the December release. You remember that one? It was early December of 2021. The game had just under a month of availability. It came out on March 3rd, so it had 28 days, basically exactly 4 weeks. It crossed 1 million already. And it sold another 310,000. Super cool. Very happy with that one. I love it. My wife, my son, my daughter, and I, we play that. We go 4-player. We have a good competition. It's pretty cool. Rounding out the chart, or rounding out the news, I should say. Just a reiteration on what I said before. Nintendo Switch total software is at 822.18 million. You saw that earlier. 55.77 million is what it gained for the quarter. 235.07 million is what it gained for the last year. One more time, that 7.64 to 1 is the software to hardware ratio. And yeah, I'm sticking with my stance of 128 million Nintendo Switch hardware being sold by March 31st, 2023. And I expect that the Nintendo Switch software to be over 1 billion. I love that number. 1,035,000. Something like that, 1,035,000. That seems pretty likely. And yeah, that was a mouthful. But I think I went over the hardware exactly how I wanted. Went over the software exactly how I wanted. Any predictions to come? That was one thing. I wanted to scroll up and say this. So I'll do two last little pieces of conversation here. First up, before too long, you're going to see a top 10 that no longer has anything below 15 million in it. If you look at the top 10 now, and I could show you this chart, or I could show you Nintendo's official chart. We could do a little bit of both, perhaps. 45, 38, 28, 26, 24, 23, 17. Number 8, Pokemon Diamond and Pokemon Pearl. It's going to be at 15 million by next quarter. So that's going to be 8 games now that are 15 million or up or above. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, perhaps not next quarter, but by the end of this year, it's going to be a 15 million seller. That's 9 games. Ring Fit Adventure at 14.09, it actually sold 560,000 copies, so not necessarily next quarter, but by the end of the year, it's going to be a 15 million seller. So we're looking at by September 30th, or for sure by December 31st, in order to be in the top 10 of Nintendo Switch's chart, you're going to have to be a 15 million seller or more. New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, it might be a 15 million seller. I mean, it's at 13.31, but it's at, 590 for the last quarter, which is considerable. Splatoon 3, that could be a 15 million seller maybe, but I'm not going to project that yet because Splatoon 2 is still trickling in. It's at 13.3. I don't think it's going to reach 15. Pokemon Legends Arceus, 12.64. It'll reach 15. It might surpass the likes of Ring Fit Adventure, which I think it will, thus potentially kicking it out. Or maybe we see some rearrangement here where the top 8 look the same, and then you've got 9 as Pokemon Legends Arceus and 10 as Ring Fit Adventure. Or maybe 8 is Pokemon Legends Arceus, 9 is Ring Fit Adventure, and 10 is Pokemon Diamond and Pokemon Pearl. Something like that. Something's going to change, right? And then who knows what's going to happen. We've got The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 coming out next year. And, I mean, just look at this thing. Look at this thing. It's at 28.17 million. It's still selling. Sorry, it's at 26.55 million. It's still selling every quarter. By the time the sequel comes out, this game will probably be a 28 million seller. If you have just a little over a third of the amount of people that bought this game show up, you've got weekend one guaranteed 10 million sales, right? Technically, it has to be a little over a third, right? A third would be, 9.3 million, assuming that it's 28, right? So 9.3 million, assuming it's 28, doesn't seem that far-fetched. It actually could be 29. It might even be 30, but I'm not going to go that far. But yeah, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's sequel could very well be this massive 10 million opening weekend seller or more. What else could be on here? Pokemon Scarlet, Pokemon Violet. It might be in the top 10, knocking out Ring Fit altogether, or might completely knock out Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, because just in that 6-week time frame of the last several weeks, of the quarter of the year, I think Scarlet and Violet's going to be a 15 million seller. Yeah, that's exciting. Okay, now that's everything I think I wanted to talk about. We went over hardware, we went over software, we went over my projections, 128 million, 1,035,000 or so, and I think that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching with me. I had a blast talking for the last 40 minutes of Nintendo's financial results for that fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. Please let me know what you think about in the comments section below. If you made it to the end, I don't always ask this, but a like, a subscribe, a notification bell hit is always appreciated. If you want to follow me on Twitter, cool. I'm always happy to engage and talk back with you. I appreciate the feedback. If you drop a comment in the comments section below here on YouTube or on PaulGaleNetwork.com or on Twitter, I will gladly get back to you. All right, this is PGN signing out. Hope you all have a great day. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Bye.